Much like the name would imply, event prize fights are special prize fights that take place once per year for an entire month. Each one of them are themed after one holiday or real-life event taking place around the time, such as Halloween, Christmas, and Valentine's Day. Its biggest attractive is usually the rewards they hold, ranging from a fair share of coins and theonite, a couple of essence shards, and most relevant being the event jackpot relics in them. These contain a specific collection of silvers nobody gives a rat's ass about, 3 golds and 3 diamonds within its pool. More often than not, these tend to result in just a silver. Sure, you may get the occasional gold and the scarce diamond pull, but usually it's best to expect nothing of note from these, which is why the event diamond relic is in place. Tucked away at a 150 million threshold, this houses a 5 diamond pool. The selection of variants will depend on the event itself, so it will either have one or two things of worth, or nothing at all. But it essentially depends on the individual's needs. Like you bet your ass I'm gonna be hyped each time a Lovecrafted shows up. So far it doesn't sound entirely bad. Decent rewards, free pulls, a diamond as a final reward, and it lasts for an entire month. Just what are even the negatives about it? Unfortunately, there's a couple of them. Like I said, they take place during the entire month. That's a great thing for those that wish to take a much more chill approach. Just do 5 to 10 million points every day and you'll get your diamond relic by the end of it. However, if you're a totally sane individual, you'll clear it within the first 4 days. Or even just the first day. That pretty much leaves the rest of the month pretty devoid of any activity related to the event, since you already got everything from it. Unless of course you wish to grind for the
top 100.
But speaking of grind, there's essentially a massive stretch of nothing between thresholds. The last 3 rewards are separated between one another by 50 million points each. Regardless of how experienced you are at the game, that takes a long while to grind out. Ideally there would be either extra rewards placed in between, or the most likely scenario, move the last 2 thresholds down to 75 and 100 million respectively, just to reduce the total amount of time invested in the prize fight. Although that implies what's there to grind is worth doing so. Well, it usually is, but bear with me. Here's the thing, a lot of the reward variants have done a lot of repeat laps in these relics.
Piss off, you blue shit!
Which is inevitable, since you can't haphazardly release new shit just for these. But the most questionable decision was the removal of elemental exclusives, and these just so happened to be very difficult to obtain through regular means. They were featured previously on event relics, so omitting their inclusion was incredibly bizarre and disappointing. Even more strange is Oh My not making it within the Valentine's Day prize fight and rewards. Except it turns out that she was given for free, a nice gesture for sure, but it's fair to say it also removes part of the reason to do the Valentine's Day prize fight itself. I think that what makes events feel tiresome more than anything is that they don't deviate too heavily from the average prize fight routine. It has modifiers featured only within the event and nowhere else, and that may give them a special feel to it, but it doesn't heavily separate them from your run-of-the-mill character prize fight. It would be cool to have some sort of special feature, like having access to one of the diamonds featured in the relic. It's not an instant solution, but at least it would allow people to try out variants they otherwise either wouldn't get or wouldn't bother investing. But regardless, despite all of the complaints, most people limit themselves at treating it like a regular prize fight, reap their rewards, and leave. So with that in mind, how are the event's modifiers themselves? Are they annoying as hell, or a surprisingly fun time? Let's find out. Ironically, being the last event to be showcased, beginnings and ends left a great impression on people. On tag-in, the player or opponent would receive either Timeless Immunity or Curse. This can become rather annoying depending on whether you need buffs to build your strategy, or you have to inflict whatever debuffs onto the opponent. So some form of debuff clearing and buff removal would be helpful. That is, if the opponents make it out alive. Because at the last 10 seconds of every minute, both parties' attack skyrockets by 1000%. Even the slightest of hits would be able to dish out unreal amounts of damage. Naturally, this also means that achieving a maximum output hit would become super easy, just plain fun with bullshit amounts of attack. For some reason it didn't affect projectiles, so my condolences to any Diamonds and Forever enthusiasts. The one event taking place by the time of me making this video, unless I get lazy again. Roses Are Red Balances 2 takes elements from Gold Perishable Prize Fight for itself. For those that need a refresher, that means any hits recover 50% of your health. although here it only applies under element bonus. Element penalty, on the other hand, loses 50% health per hit, making it very undesirable and the reason you're going to die most of the time. Trust me, it's gonna happen. You're gonna forget about it. The only real strategy to either benefit from it or avoid it entirely is paying attention to what elements you're carrying on to the fight. Neutrals are unaffected by it, and double can change element to reap all the benefits from the recovery. Last, there's one important factor to this event. It requests a Valentine both on defense and whenever you enter a fight, so be sure to have a fair share of them going into it, otherwise it will become a slog. Craic pipes some heads is just diet-like prize fight. Every 10 seconds, the enemy cycles between a 10-second final stand and immunity, meaning curse and removals come advised. Otherwise, you may jeopardize the fight by losing due to timeout. Of course, having it just be a lesser version of an existing prize fight would be really boring and not even unique. That's why air element variants get some extra bonus. Every 3 seconds they get 3 precision stacks, and all critical hits have a 20% chance of granting a 10-second regeneration. It's nice to have some extra recovery, although this makes engaging pain wheels more difficult, ironically enough. Outside of that, you could profit the precision for some annoying defenders like Killjoy or Death Wish, and the regeneration helps you stay in the field for longer. Plus, for a few instances, such as Poltergust, it can really benefit their game plan, so not too bad of an effect, just nothing amazing. Spring clearing puts a very interesting twist in buff and debuff gain, as every time you use the blockbuster, every single buff and debuff gets removed. That forces you to be extra careful with how you plan your approaches, so you either lose all the buffs you've been gathering, or all debuffs on the enemy get cleared. Alternatively, this can be used greatly to your benefit, to either save yourself from a difficult situation or speed up a kill. But only having the equivalent of Dark Hole would be pretty boring, so every 5 seconds both parties get a random 20-second buff or debuff. You know, to fuck you up, to spice things up a little. And to add even more spice to the mix, if you use the Creature of Habit on last year's spring clearing, the devs made a sneaky little prank where using a blockbuster would lower your attack until you eventually dealt 0 damage. Further proof that double players are the most punished individuals. Viva La Fiesta has lived in infamy for a few years due to having an element restriction that cut about 2/5 of your collection. Now that stupid as hell condition has been lifted on offense, although it still revolves around using variants of either air, light or fire. Every 10 seconds, variants with any of these elements will gain 3 stacks of either regeneration, blessing or enrage. It's pretty basic to get around, although blessing can get annoying on the hands of defense, so curse and buff removal can come in handy. Some cool interactions that can tap further into the event's modifier include Poltergust gaining instant full meter, or Phantom Threats quickly recovering 30% health and obtaining 3 enrages when she gains the blessing stacks. Otherwise, it's now a run-of-the-mill event, which I definitely take over the previous shitstorm. Son of a Beach is characteristic for its startup with immunity and 2 barrier stacks, making it much more difficult for debuff users that don't possess any sort of removal. Thankfully these expire, but it takes 20 seconds, so it's too lengthy of a wait. Additionally, when not benefiting from barrier or immunity, you start suffering 20-second bleeds every 10 seconds, so be sure to have some form of recovery handy. Also be ready to see a lot of overclocks and Assassin's Creeds, where you might want to mix removals and curse against them, inverse polarity on the latter case being also extra effective. And if suffering bleeds turns out to be too scary to handle, just use immunity supports or taunts, or barrier with variants like X-Blocked or Feather Edges. And since the event's barrier has a set duration, Rockstar users may get some extra kicks out of it. Fireworks Show is a stun-lock power trip. Hits in midair can deal double damage when the opponent has a full charge blockbuster, and hits that remove 10% health in one hit will remove 1 buff. Doing so will also stun for 5 seconds. That allows for a much more fast-paced combat if you profit the effect well, and use characters that can dish out massive damage in a single hit consistently, like Fuqua or Beowulf. Keep in mind this effect's applied to both sides, so should you slip up somehow, that's potentially a secure death on your end. In terms of modifiers specific to each party, players get 5 precision and evasion stacks every 60 seconds, giving some extra leeway and horsepower if you're taking too long. The opponent gains Enrage and Barrier every 5 seconds, which is both beneficial and threatening. Beneficial because that allows you to stun much easier, without having to rely on specific variants or anything similar. Threatening because on higher streaks, the constant barrier gain can stall out the match until it goes to timeout and you lose. As such, Curse or Slime come in handy to keep the enemy in check. But as a whole, it's entertaining to have easy access stun for everyone, making cold stones even more pointless. God bless America. Let me just say, Slots of Fun was a complete shit show when it first dropped. Massive lag spikes would hit on a frequent basis, and if you were to make use of Standout, you might as well just quit and start over. It was downright unplayable. But that was just a one-time thing, and thankfully it's been patched. I hope. Leaving fun times aside, the effect itself is interesting but also pretty janky and annoying. Every 10 seconds, both sides gain a 20-second random stackable buff, already making it bothersome due to increased odds at the enemy getting either Blessing or Auto Block. Having exactly 2 stacks of any buff gives permanent immunity, 3 stacks permanent haste, and 5 stacks permanent precision. With the modifier alone, you'll only make it as far as 2 stacks, so you'll have to gain buffs from variant abilities if you wish to profit from the other 2. Examples include Flight Trap with her 5 regeneration stacks on kill, Overclocked or X-Bot with their stackable barrier, and Gen Freeze or Eager Deceiver with the permanent enrage. In terms of dealing with the AI, buff removal takes higher priority over Curse, since 2 stacks are easy to get, and that equates to permanent immunity. If the game is to suffer another lag attack, I can help you cry about it on Twitter. What even is it supposed to be themed after anyway? It should have been themed after the San Mamere holidays. Now that is an event and a half. A class of one's own has one of the most annoying piece of shit effects ever that makes you question what kind of crack were they smoking. It's what I would say if they didn't have the 20 combo combination. Yeah, the invincibility on the enemy when they drop below 25 is annoying, but like I said, a 20 combo hit allows you to get rid of it, which shouldn't be difficult to do with the majority of characters. Although you have to be quick, because as long as they benefit from invincibility, they leech health from you. Intercepting dash attacks also works, but it's usually much jankier to pull off. And one more strategy is to hit them for a kill before dropping under 25%. There's also the 5 enrage stacks when the AI drops under half health, which also grants constant meter. It can be fairly overlooked, but having some form of removal or meter control around doesn't hurt. Last, the random buffs when matching character type are pretty pointless. They may save your ass, but 90% of the time you'll forget that's even a thing. Nowhere else but during Halloween could costume party fit in. Both sides gain or suffer a random permanent buff or debuff, only interchangeable with a blockbuster use. Depending on how the gains pan out, it can be really good like invincibility for you and curse for the opponent, average like both of you getting enraged, or a complete shit show as you suffer from wither and the AI has unflinching. I hope you went with a grappler to mitigate that shit. There really isn't much you can do outside of equipping immunity and having curse ready to use, so yeah, use that if the effect gets on your nerves. Side note, if your fighter suffers from permanent inverse polarity and you tag them out, they will slowly lose health on the bench until they die off screen, so be very careful about when you switch characters. Side note, Idle Threat wasn't in it last year, so overall, my disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined. Playing Combocopia for the first time felt like a pretty forgettable experience, but it wasn't frustrating by any means. A 2 combo hit will inflict you with slow, but once reaching 8 hits, you'll gain haste, but so will the opponent. At 20 combo hits, you'll gain 2 random 20-second buffs, but so will the opponent. Yeah, curse and removals is convenient, which thankfully it should be easier on those that rely on blockbusters for it, like Philia or Parasol. And that's pretty much it, really. Now I'm afraid I lied about the event being forgettable. It was only 90% forgettable. So far, this is the only prize fight where a timed precision was ever present. It functions the same way permanent precision did, where as long as it was active, you deal critical hits and the buff wouldn't leave, unlike the regular timeless version. It makes me wish that some variants like, say, Prism Plumage had access to it, even though they'd still be underwhelming, but goddamn that'd still be a cool addition. Season's Beatings is partially the precursor to many of the effects seen today in the current Rift Battles format, carrying over several of its effects into them. Fire variants get an enraged stack every 2 seconds, which is removed on hit, usually more helpful on variants with unblockable properties like Dead Hit and Risky Ginger, but otherwise it's incredibly negligible and downright useless in most cases. Water variants get a 3-second armor stack if they suffer less than 1% of damage, most noticeable on high streaks and bulky defenders such as Heavy Metal, but nothing impossible with the right tools, like Bleed, Miasma or Slime. Air variants convert all buffs the opponent has whenever they use a blockbuster. That makes everyone a competent buff controller, although the efficiency of this effect will depend on who you're up against, usually anything focused around buffs. Light variants will revive with 25% health once 60 seconds have passed after they died, and with a 15-second final stand. Usually you may be able to dispatch the entire team before the 60 seconds have passed, But if it still doesn't prove enough for you, make use of permakill tools, such as Robo Fortune or Umbrella's Tier 3, Budding Cold's ability, or Squiggly's Prestige. Lastly, Dark variants inflict a 10-second disable blockbusters whenever they suffer a critical hit. Depending on the defense, it won't really matter, but you can always run immunity supports if it really bothers you. Or use gridless variants in case you want to go hardcore about it. On offense, it doesn't do anything. And that's about it for Season's Beatings. A very colorful catalog of effects, incentivizing to try out as many strategies as possible, even though realistically 2 elements out of 5 are viable.
You American son of the beach.
Well, that's about all the event prize fights released, hopefully with no changes whatsoever to keep this video less dated on the long run. Now I would normally end my videos with some sort of conclusion.
Su hijo, en su hija, en su abuelo, en su abuela, en toda su puta descendencia, es una puta mierda de juego. Puta mierda de juego, puta mierda de juego, puta mierda de juego.